Springfield's Talk 1041. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Thursday. We got a Heroes Breakfast tomorrow. That will be at Scramblers or Friday Road Show if you're a veteran. As we broadcast live from 6A to 9A tomorrow morning at Scramblers, you're going to get free breakfast. That thanks to Scramblers, of course. Their continued generosity, along with the Warriors Journey, incredible organization for veterans and active service and family members. Also, Air Services, Heating, Cooling, Plumbing, Electrical, and Delta Roofing, all every month chipping in together in order to buy breakfast for all of the veterans that decide to join us. So we hope that you do as well. We are well past the halfway mark, have been since not long after we opened to the public our Great Escape. We've got the details for that at ksgf.com. I wouldn't wait. If you are sort of mulling it over, trying to decide, I, of course, would encourage you to do it. It's just a really great time. It's a great deal. And it is great for folks that maybe don't want to hassle with the arrangement of transportation and, getting to the resort from the airport and worrying about getting ripped off. And, just there's that safety in numbers when it comes to the travel portion of things. And then, of course, fun in numbers if you want when we're in the all-inclusive resort or off of it if you want to travel in that way. One of the things that is a little bit different about this particular resort compared to what we've been to in the past, we try to change it up a little bit because we've been to Cancun a number of different times. It's in an area that is more densely populated with hotels and resorts. And so there is evidently just very, very close marketplaces and a lot of different areas that are meant for people like us that are traveling to the area. And that's why they're built up around that close proximity to the hotel that we'll be staying on right there on the beach. And that's something just a little bit different than what we've really had in the past. So that'll be a nice little added bonus perhaps for some of you. And of course, there at the hotel or the resort, you may think, well, we've never gone on any sort of excursion. We always set up a catamaran excursion, which is so much fun. It's a private event for just those that are on the Great Escape that want to join us. And it usually involves, drinking and snorkeling. And depending where we are, we've before swam with nurse sharks and stingrays as part of the catamarans. It depends on where we are and what the particular catamaran offers, but whether you join us for that or you decide to go out on your own, there's plenty of people at the resort that will help you. And of course, Cam that goes along with us can help you out as well. So it's such a fantastic experience for folks who have never done anything like this before, but also a fantastic experience if you do it once or twice a year. And we opened it to the public last Thursday, and as of Tuesday, I believe it was, when I had a conversation with Cam, we were around or a little over the 2/3 mark of occupying all of the different rooms and the seats on the direct flight that we had reserved. And it isn't uncommon for us to have a reserve list, people that just waited a little bit too long, unfortunately, and did not make the cut because of that delayed decision to go ahead and join us, and so they get on a backup list. Now, while it isn't common, there have been times when, somebody had to, for unforeseen circumstances, drop out, and then the alternates, if you want to look at it that way, were actually able to go. So it does happen, but I wouldn't bank on it. It's like being standby on a flight somewhere. You just have your fingers crossed and hope something goes wrong for someone else. Not the most secure way to do it. All the details, including how to get in contact with Cam today if you want to reserve your slot or just ask any questions, you can find that at ksgf.com. Yesterday, comments made by President Trump as the back and forth between the United States and Zelensky and Putin continue to escalate. And I think that it's increasingly clear the party that is being well, I'm trying to think how to diplomatically put this. The problematic element in terms of ending this thing is Zelensky. Now, that doesn't mean that he's wrong. I mean, that people are going to have a variation of opinions, but he is the individual that has, we saw this, of course, with the infamous Oval Office meeting in which he showed up claiming that it was because he was going to sign that mineral deal, and then decided to just chuck the whole thing under a bus. And things have revealed themselves subsequent to that behind the scenes he was constantly doing a bait and switch, constantly claiming that he was ready to sign a deal and then get together and then all of a sudden changes course. And so he has become increasingly unreliable in terms of trying to work out a deal. And the Trump administration, of course, last week or the week prior signaled that it's getting to the point now where Trump is realizing that what it is that needs to occur for both parties to put an end to this is something that at least one of the parties may not be willing to do. And if that's the case, then then this is what I like about Trump. He said, okay, well, I did what I can. There's nothing else for me to do here. And he was asked about after there was some back and forth, and we'll share this information coming up. Trump really hitting on Zelensky because of something, they're hitting out at Zelensky because of something Zelensky said. And Zelensky talking about, well, he was hoping to meet with Trump at the Pope's funeral, and Trump was asked about that. And so his latest statements, in which he's still holding out hope that there will be some deal, and some of the tent poles of the deal, apparently, as they are now, have been released to the public, and we'll share what those are also. So that's just a bit of what we're going to start with today. Right now, the latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see mostly sunny skies throughout the morning and then a slight chance for rain in the afternoon with a high near 80. Tonight a chance of showers and then mostly cloudy with a low around 60. For your Friday, a 60% chance of showers through mid-afternoon with a high near 76. And looking ahead to Saturday, mostly cloudy with a high near 70.
I find any story about James River Church or Assembly, is that the technical or the official James River Assembly? Is that what it is officially?
I think it's just James River
Just James
Church.
River Church.
I'm probably wrong, though.
Yeah, I clearly I don't attend.
I do not either.
Well, and incidentally, today would have been a great day for Christy
I
Flecki to be
know.
here. That she and her husband are out of town, and so well, some of the other family maybe as well. I don't know, but all I know is that she was headed out of town, and so she's not going to be here today. Maybe next week we can talk with her. But any story that involves James River Church, I find it just interesting in a observational way and people's reaction to it and so forth. And they've been in the news for, I mean, a number of different times, right? This most recent, Michael Landis was mentioning, this separation announcement from the Assembly of God. And, I think most people probably, if they don't attend James River or have any association with it, probably didn't even know necessarily that was a relationship. And I know there was a news leader piece and press releases were sent out. And I noticed that most of the comments, other than people just jabbing James River because that's a popular thing to do, was, well, what does this mean exactly? Why did this? What would be behind this? And that, to me, seems to be a big missing piece of things. And, but I don't care because, and this is just my mindset, and listen, I'm not saying it's the right perspective. Sometimes there isn't a right or wrong perspective. There's just different perspectives. It doesn't really matter to me because I don't go there. It matters to me just as much as any other church I don't attend when I drive by it and wondering, well, what's their affiliation with this organ or that? I don't care. And there's nothing wrong with caring, but I'm just always like, what difference does this make to the public at large? Now, there may be some reason or something interesting about it, but that doesn't appear to be part of any of the news stories. It's just letting you know, hey, by the way, they're severing these ties. I imagine that people who attend James River are probably already in the loop and know about it. The rest of us, it doesn't have anything to do with us whatsoever. And so to me, I'm guessing, well, there's a number of reasons. One, because of the size of James River, and, that they do different forms of, I would say it's fair to say, public relations stuff, really getting out there out front and putting themselves out there, marketing their name. And I don't use marketing in a derogatory way, but just, trying to make sure people are aware of them and the things that they do. And, they used to do fireworks displays. They still do big Easter egg stuff. And so people know about them. They know of their existence. And so when there is a story involving the church, then you can understand that, people are like, oh, I know that place. But it's like, what other organizations, unless there's something really massively illegal going on, or like there's a murder inside the Kiwanis Club, then you're like, oh, that's a story because it's a murder. Wherever it happened, it would be a story. The disproportionate matter of care and concern for an institution here locally by people that have nothing to do with it versus all the other institutions and organizations that people don't have anything to do with. Now, I think some of it is media driven. I think that there is an inherent anti-Christian bias in particularly the news leader that I would say has been demonstrated by the way that they've covered a number of different events and just the perspective that they provide, intentional or otherwise, regarding Christianity. And James River in particular, there's just sort of this approach of, well, they must be doing something wrong, or there's got to be something scandalous here, going on, so we have to report on this. And what was that? Didn't they do the news story where I guess that there was a claim somebody healed a thumb or finger. Remember
A
that
toe.
last year? A toe, right? And now how much of that was valid? I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because I don't care. I don't go there. I just do not care. And it's such an interesting thing to see where it's not a government entity. It only, as best I can tell, because it hasn't been described any other way, it doesn't affect or impact a single person who doesn't choose to go there. And I, again, imagine that those people are already in the loop as to why this is occurring, whether this is a massive deal or not a massive deal. One may ask, why is it that they would even send out a press release? Well, I get that because it is a significant relationship change, apparently. And if they don't send one out, well, then people are, well, why didn't you? Why were you trying to hide it? What were you trying to keep secret? So it's like, let's just, put out there, this is occurring. No big deal. Here's what it means. Here's what it doesn't mean. Things aren't going to change for us and so forth. But I don't know. I just find the whole thing interesting, the way that anything with James River gets covered. And I guess ultimately in the end, I'm like, why does this even get covered? This story, the thing even about the claim that somebody got healed or grew back a toe that was cut off or something because of prayer. And so what? Who cares? I mean, and I'm not even saying that it's not interesting fodder in the office place to be like, oh, did you hear this or did you see that? Or, but does that mean that it's newsworthy? And maybe it is. I mean, am I way off base on this? Do you see where I'm coming from
Well,
over there?
yeah, no,
I'm
I
just like,
understand what I'm over here reading some of the comments on the Ozarks First post, and a lot of people are making jabs, but no,
well, sure.
I agree with you, but I do find it in some capacity interesting. I kind of would like to know a little bit more information on why there wasn't really a statement. It was just like, well, the board of trustees, we made this decision. Why? What went into this?
Yeah.
What does this mean?
And from a private institution's perspective, that may be something they're like, well, those are internal matters. And I get that. I understand that.
But then it goes to the point of like, well, then why do we have a story of it?
Well,
Of this?
right. Why does the media feel? Well, let me put it this way. If it were just the average church that you drive by other than James River, would this be a story?
Yeah.
And I suspect that it wouldn't. And so it's just almost like famous for the sake of being famous, where the media decides, oh, James River, this is, I believe it's largely led by the news leader, though this story, obviously, some of the news outlets had, and they did send out a press release. And I also acknowledge that in media today, oftentimes, anyone that sends out a press release that anyone's ever heard of, oh, we're going to write a story about it without evaluating, is this really something that is providing information that is of value to the public at large. But it's a judgment call. I'm not a journalist guy. I'm just my perspective just as a citizen that sees a story like that, and my not just initial, but after thinking about it, ultimately I'm like, what? Who cares? What difference is it? If you don't go there, if you're, for the, what do you think? 99.9% of their readership and the viewership of the news don't go to that church. I mean,
Probably not.
while it's a massive church, and I would guess that locally it probably has the largest number of parishioners of any church in the area, that's still beyond the drop in the bucket compared to the population at large. And I don't know. It's to be one of those weird. It's not even. Maybe it's not weird. I just mull it over and think it over, and I'm just trying to figure out: is this really? I don't know. For me, doesn't make any difference. Every time I hear about a scandal that is just not even a scandal in terms of theft or somebody breaking the law that involves James River. Oh, they put on this event and well, it was this or it was that, and I'm like, all right, that's their thing. Doesn't matter to me. That's me. All right, coming up, Zelensky shuts down reported Trump peace plan, what that peace plan includes, and the latest comments from Donald Trump. All that straight ahead. Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line 447 KSGF. All right, I mismanaged my time here just a little bit. I apologize for that. I know it's frustrating when you're listening, so we have traffic here in just a moment. But we did get from one of our listeners who is blind a message in, a question regarding the Great Escape. And I thought it was a pretty interesting question, saying, I'm curious about the Great Escape. I don't have the money to go on them, but I wonder, though, how they would be about having a blind person if I would come up with the money. Other countries that do not have ADA protection laws like we do, and of course, the other cultures. As you guys know, I get around just fine by myself. I fly to another city and take public transit and stuff. I wonder how the resort would be if I were to make it. Would I even be allowed to come, being that I would be by myself? Some countries have odd laws about that stuff. Well, one, anyone can come by themselves. It costs a little bit extra, not a whole lot, because the rooms are built for two. They don't charge you for two full people. It seems as if usually it's a couple few $100s more
I believe
maybe,
so.
because part of the cost is the seat on the airplane, and you're only taking up one of those. And to me, it is. If I were going alone, I'd say, oh yeah, that bit of an increase certainly is worth it. I wouldn't feel like I was paying for two people and wasting it. Um, that's a good question, though, in terms of, listen, these resorts, I'll tell you this, at least we go to like the 5-star, all-inclusive, very nice resorts. They're catering to people from other countries, and the United States clearly being a large one. And so I honestly, I can't say that I've necessarily made a point to observe how what we would consider ADA compliant things are, but I would think that you would not have any trouble. Cam would be the one to answer
Also,
that question.
haven't we had a couple of listeners that are blind go on our trips before?
Well,
Yes.
yeah, actually, that is true. Now I don't know whether I know
They
the
did have
one that
someone with them,
yes,
so
that
that
is
did help a little
true.
bit, but
But yeah, that's absolutely true. We have had a person that on more than maybe three different trips or
yeah.
so, give or take, that is blind, and but he didn't go by himself. Now, of course, you always have friends with our group, but I just imagine, particularly the resorts we go to, that they certainly would be compliant for someone that does have a disability, just based off of who they're catering to. And, it's not what I would say is the level of awareness on a resort like the ones that we go to is not necessarily in line with the culture itself. So, for example, you're just in any random city in Mexico. That random city may not necessarily be worried about tourists from America. That's not what their thing is. While these resorts are, or Europe, people from Europe and so forth. But yeah, I mean, if you really want a more specific answer, I'd definitely just reach out to Cam and over at the travel group, and she could answer those questions. But it'd be great to have Dewey come along. It'd be
Yeah.
awesome. Would love that. You should work on it. I don't know how, but
Come
whatever.
on, Dewster.
Yeah, come on, Dewey. We get somebody to go with you. We can find some chick to go along. We've got traffic now, weather in a moment. I'm Nick Reed.
Springfield's Talk 1041, Sarah Myers here, and the Pyramid Roofing Company. Spring severe weather season is in full swing with even more storms rolling through the area this evening. If you experience any damage to your roof, don't go with just some random door knocker. They will make you sign contingency agreements, and once you are locked in, it is almost impossible to get out of. And oftentimes, they don't have your best interest in mind. Now, with the Pyramid Roofing Company team, they offer free roof inspections. They don't use scare tactics. They don't make you sign anything right up front, and they work with you through that insurance process. So if you do experience roof issues this spring, schedule that appointment with the Pyramid Roofing Company team. Now, you can find all of their contact information under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at KSGF.com. Your first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Today, we'll see mostly sunny skies throughout the morning and then a slight chance for rain in the afternoon with a high near 80. Tonight, a chance of showers and then mostly cloudy with a low around 60. For your Friday, a 60% chance of showers through mid-afternoon with a high near 76. And looking ahead to Saturday, mostly cloudy with a high near 70.
Donald Trump was asked yesterday during some executive order signings his thoughts or comments on Zelensky, saying that he hoped that the funeral for the Pope could be utilized as a meeting place between he and President Trump regarding any potential peace deal between Ukraine and Russia.
I don't know. I don't know that he's going to the funeral or not, but I just hope he gets this thing solved, because we're losing about, think of this, 5,000. I was saying 2,500, and everyone was telling me that's low. 5,000 soldiers are being killed every week, approximately. Think of that. Every week, 5,000 soldiers, but let's say from 3,000 to 5,000 are being killed. They're Russian and Ukrainian. They're not Americans, but they're Russian, but they're people. And they're humans. They're human beings. They have families. They wave goodbye to their son, and then they get a call that the son's no longer there. It's a vicious war. And if I can help solve it, we're not losing our soldiers, but we're losing soldiers, a lot of people. And if I can solve it because of a certain ability, that would be great. And if it doesn't happen, I will say that I think Russia is ready. And a lot of people said Russia wanted to go for the whole thing. And I think we have a deal with Russia. We have to get a deal with Zelensky, and I hope that I thought it might be easier to deal with Zelensky. So far, it's been harder, but that's okay. It's all right. But I think we have a deal with both. I hope they do it, because I'm looking to save. And, we spend a lot of money, but this is about a lot of humanity. This is the worst. I get the pictures, the satellite pictures. I've never seen anything like it, of the fields after some of these battles. It's horrible that it's going for nothing. We would have never had this problem. You would have never had that war if I were president. I guarantee you that. And for 4 years, you didn't have it. Yeah.
All right. And so Zelensky, prior to that statement, there was a framework put out there. And Zelensky was essentially like, ain't going to happen. And a lot of it had to do with the Crimean Peninsula. Now, let me read to you here, according to the reports, what Russia gets, what Ukraine gets in terms of this framework. But before I do that, I want to note, because, of course, with the media, they love to take anything out of context oftentimes. And Trump's statement here that Zelensky's been a little more difficult to deal with than he thought he would be. Now, of course, the media will paint that, if they even decide to focus on it, as, well, here Trump, he loves Putin, says Putin's a better guy. No, that doesn't mean that at all. What that means is that whatever the motivation is, Putin or the people that are speaking to our people on his behalf are much more straightforward and say, oh, yeah, we'll do this, we won't do that. Whereas Zelensky will say, oh, yeah, I'll do that. And then within 30 minutes, he's saying something different. That it's very, very difficult to nail down a deal when one of the parties says something behind closed doors and then immediately goes out there and says the opposite. And Zelensky he's been doing that for some time. This really first reared its ugly head and became public knowledge after what most people initially thought was the very first falling apart of the a mineral deal. And it was Marco Rubio giving that interview, I believe, to Catherine Herridge, in which he said, listen, you have to understand, this is like the third time that Zelensky has said, let's get together and do a deal, and then turns around and all of a sudden it's like he's schizophrenic and he's saying the opposite. He had mentioned in that interview that he and J.D. Vance both spoke with him, and he said, yeah, don't worry, this is a done deal. I just got to talk to my parliament. They'll do it. And then Marco Rubio noted the next day, I see in the papers, he's saying there's no way I'll ever let this happen. So that does make things more difficult. It doesn't mean that Putin's a better guy or that Putin is right, but it does make things more difficult, and that's what Trump is talking about here. Now, according to the reports, here is what Russia would get under this framework. Formal U.S. recognition of Ukraine's Crimea Peninsula as Russian territory, which is a major departure from Washington's longstanding doctrine, which refuses to acknowledge annexed territory as belonging to the seizing power. Now, that I want to talk about here in just a couple of moments, because this is going to be the big sticking point and a big point of contention and a big attack point by Democrats on Trump. Furthermore, de facto recognition of Russia's occupation of 4 regions in eastern Ukraine, meaning that the U.S. would acknowledge that Moscow controls those areas but formally still consider them to be land of Ukraine. A pledge that the U.S. would not support Ukraine becoming a member of NATO. Lifting sanctions to boost Russia's economy, which has struggled through its war on Ukraine, and opportunities for more economic cooperation with the U.S., especially in the energy and industrial field, what Ukraine would get. Assistance from European military forces as a robust security guarantee following a ceasefire. The U.S. would not be involved in that measure. Russia would allow a small portion of Ukraine's Kharkiv Oblast, currently occupied by Moscow, navigation rights in the Dnieper River, which runs along the front lines, and assistance in post-war rebuilding, although it is unclear from where that funding would come. There's 2 ways that a war comes to an end. One of the ways is when one side just destroys the other to the point that the other side says, okay, we give up, we'll do whatever you want. The other way is when the 2 sides say, all right, we just want this thing to end. We don't believe at this point that either side can win, or if we do believe one side can win over the other, the losses economically and in terms of human toll is not worth it. So we both need to come to some sort of agreement in which neither side is going to come out fully ahead. That's not how deals work. People who enter into agreements do so wanting something, and in order for that agreement to occur, they're going to have to feel as if they're getting something out of it. There seems to be this, and I'm just talking, there is the who's right and who's wrong, what's right, what's wrong, what's moral, what's immoral, who's a better guy, who's a worse guy. Then there's also the reality of what is happening and what's going on. And Trump has the ability to understand those differences. And Trump's approach has been, once again, I've equated it to, you've got, 2 kids that are fighting, and you tell them, just stop it, go to your rooms, and, they're both saying, well, it's his fault. No, it's his fault. He started it. And then you say, I don't care. That doesn't matter to me. I want it to stop. I want it to stop now. Go to your separate rooms. I don't care who started it. That is irrelevant to me. And that's Trump's approach. That is not relevant to him. And he's been very clear about that. His goal is to make it stop. That's his goal. When you let's look at the Crimean Peninsula, for example. I believe it's been clear from the very beginning that if there was going to be any sort of deal that Russia agreed to, the Crimean Peninsula was going to have to be part of it. There's if you're looking at simply what can be agreed to here, Russia is not going to give up everything. Now, to me, if you're looking at it and trying to determine, okay, of all of the occupied territory, if in order to end this, Russia has to get any of it, what would it be? The Crimean Peninsula makes sense for a couple of reasons. One of which is because, and this is what cracks me up, this is something, right or wrong, that did not occur in the context of this recent invasion. This was back in the Obama years that this occupation took place, and it's not something that the Ukrainians were fighting. In fact, the world was somewhat shocked that Ukraine didn't put up any fight at all. None. They just let Russia come take it. This would be a different situation, I believe, if that Crimean Peninsula occupation had taken place within the last couple of years during this most recent conflict. Because the approach of it is, okay, let's look what was the layout of things when this military invasion began. And the layout of things was that Russia had occupied the Crimean Peninsula and been there for a decade. And the world, like I said, they wagged their fingers. Secretary of State John Kerry at the time said, somebody needs to tell Putin that he can't just do this. Well, somebody needed to tell you, and the Obama administration, he did. And nobody stopped him. I mean, nobody even put up a fight. That doesn't mean that he should, by default, the right and moral thing to do is to let him have it. But I think that this Crimean Peninsula situation is going to be used as a battering point against Trump, that he wants them, like, he's just given Putin whatever he wants. Look what he's given him, this huge chunk of land. He did not give that to them. If the United States of America or the world in any capacity has any responsibility in giving Putin that land, it was a decade ago. It was not the Trump administration. That did not happen during the Trump administration. It happened a long time ago. So that is nothing at all within the time frame and realm of the Trump administration giving Putin anything, because he already had that. Maybe not legally. The lifting of sanctions to boost Russia's economy, again, these are things that are enticements in order to get this thing to end. Like you when it comes to this, and I actually this morning I had a voicemail I listened to from a father whose son died fighting over there. And some of you know that I'm familiar with the Crimean Peninsula. I spent time there. I had friends who fled from there because that's where they lived. And I understand what if I were there, and what I think is the right thing to do, or what would be the most righteous outcome, is that Putin gets nothing whatsoever. In fact, maybe suffers a little bit as a lesson as to this is what happens when you invade a sovereign nation. And I also understand that if you have family members or loved ones that die in a war like this, that you can see it as, well, they died in vain. And I don't know that necessarily it's all a matter of perspective, but without that battle, Putin may have completely run over Ukraine. If it weren't for those brave souls, he may have ended up completely reacquiring Ukraine as part of the greater Russia, which is part of his ultimate vision. So I don't know, and it's a matter of perspective, that everyone would agree that their deaths would be totally in vain. But I understand that perspective. But I also understand results. And I understand that one of two things is going to occur. Well, there's one of three things in reality. A deal's going to be made in which both sides have to give up something they don't want, and they're both able to walk away and say, oh, we won in this capacity. one side militarily beats the other, which is not going to happen unless we decided or Europe decided we're going to get involved in this militarily, which I don't think anyone right now has the stomach for. Or the third option is it continues the way that it did under the Biden administration, where you got 5,000 human beings getting slaughtered in this death machine of a war, and it just keeps going and going and going and going, and money keeps funneling in, and by the way, into Russia as well, largely because of our European allies, who, while they virtue signal about the importance of standing up to Putin, are funneling money to him by lifting sanctions. And I think that's something that, as the left, they're going to attack Trump and say, oh, look, part of this is to lift sanctions on Putin. Europe's already done that. Hand over fist, they're funneling money to Putin. They're funding both sides of this thing. And some people will say, well, you should just continue to fight anyhow because it's the right thing to do. Okay. But what we have to accept is that means that it doesn't end. The thing about conflicts like this, wars like this, killings like this is there's usually not an easy answer. If there was, these things wouldn't happen. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. Hunter Hardscapes and Outdoor, the premier landscaping service in Ozark. Of course, the quality is there. It is premier. It's not just in the title. In fact, the product that they utilize, they special order it because they're not like what a lot of crews do, and they come in and they got a little back area, and we want a 10 by 12 foot patio here, and so they do the measurements, and then they go buy some sand and some pavers from the big box store, load it in their truck, come back and lay it all out. That's not what you're getting with Hunter Hardscapes and Outdoor. You are just getting so much more. It's not just a step above, but several steps above. And it really is about the experience. So many of us will enjoy going to a certain place because, they have a great patio. Oh, we love to sit outside in the patio, right? Well, many folks have recognized that you can turn your own home into an outdoor oasis in the same fashion. And while you still want to get out and have a good time, what a great place to entertain. When you get together with friends, say, hey, come on over to my place and, we'll smoke out or just sit around the fire and have drinks, smoke cigars, whatever it may be. And you can, get so many great memories out of that, having that outdoor oasis in your own home. And the key to that, Hunter Hardscapes and Outdoor, their website is hunterhardscapes.com, also ksgf.com under Nick's endorsements. When you understand how Trump operates, which, by the way, isn't a secret if you just pay attention or read his own book, the way that he's handling this deal with Ukraine and Russia becomes so much clearer, and you just get it. And when, Trump is talking about, hey, we may just have to walk away from this, I think that this is a positive thing because it is an acknowledgement that he understands reality. And past presidents would have let it drag on just to look like they were doing something in defiance of reality. And Trump is the sort of person who's like, okay, this is not going to happen. So there's no point dwelling on it. There's no point letting it drag on over and over again. Now, if that is what occurs, I believe that his critics will somehow make it seem as if he made things worse. But what we have to remember is if Trump makes the calculated decision and his recognition that a deal cannot be made between these two, whoever's fault it is, it's not going to happen. So, okay, we're not going to spend time on it any longer. What needs to be understood is that means it's just going right back to the way that it was under Biden. And that apparently was a wonderful way, right? That's what we were all told. That was fantastic. It was wonderful. Just allowing the thing to go on and on and on is what we should do. We should all put flags up on our social media sites and hold up posters that say I support Ukraine and so forth. And you know, that we were told the way things are now is a good, positive thing. So I think we should remind critics of Trump, if he recognizes that there is no peace deal that is makeable, and so we step away, that it's simply going to continue the way that we have all been told is the righteous way. Springfield's Talk 1041. I'm Nick Reed. You know, I wouldn't call it an upside, unfortunately, because it's going to result in more death and destruction. But for those that will point to, you know, a failure of the peace deal or trying to get both sides to have enough to where they end this thing, and this standard talking point is, well, just giving Putin whatever he wants. All right, fine. We're out. Let him continue. I mean, it's not your kids that are dying. It's not your father's brothers. Let it go on. And it's amazing. It's always the so-called compassionate people on the left who are anti-war, whose position is one that results in the war continuing day after day. All right. It's not our part of the world. Springfield's Talk 1041. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Hope you're doing fantastic this morning. Tomorrow, if you're a veteran, free breakfast at Scramblers between 6 and 9 a.m. That is as we broadcast live. It's a special Friday for you. Scramblers, The Warrior's Journey, Delta Roofing, Air Services, Heating, Cooling, Plumbing, Electrical, all coming together in order to buy you breakfast. That is tomorrow morning. I don't know if Emily Johnson will be joining us. I know she's just been she's been fighting a little bit of a bug of sorts, and so she may not be joining us, but she is one of the many faces, one of the many voices you hear when we do broadcast out there, and she does that because she wants to be available to you. We get characters out there. Lori Rook, Ozarks Elder Law, she's oftentimes out there. Emily Johnson, you've heard her for years joining us. And that's the real difference between somebody that just does a job to get it done and to get a paycheck versus somebody that really wants to be fully available to you at all times possible and proactively make themselves accessible. And that sometimes happens to be you there at Scramblers while she's there, but perhaps on a wider scale, all of you that are actually listening, the ability to hear her talk about, just some of the things that may be helpful to you as you're looking to buy or sell your home. She's very accessible. Reach out to her if you have any questions. Don't think that, we're probably not going to put our house on the market for a year, and so I don't really want to bother her. I'll just Google my question. Don't do that. Utilize her. That's what she wants you to do, so that when the time comes, you are best prepared to either sell or buy that home. Emily Johnson, House Theory Realty, also Nick's endorsements at KSGF.com. David Hogg may be in trouble. Yeah, so apparently, according to reports from Notice, this is news of the United States. It came from, I don't know, it's an offshoot of somebody that used to be at the AP or something. It's unbiased news, of course, like all the somewhat mainstream media outlets. But anyhow, according to Notice, DNC chairman Ken Martin is expected to unveil a new plan today during a call for DNC members. The plan would include an ultimatum for David Hogg: stay neutral in primary races or resign as vice chair. This is something that has really been brewing for a while. As David Hogg had announced a couple of weeks ago, he's vice chair of the DNC. And the point of the DNC, largely, it's just to stay in power, to get elected as often as possible, get as many people elected as possible. And if you're not in power, to regain that power. This is why you fundraise. This is why you get the messaging right, and that is your operational value in the whole scheme of things, politically speaking. And David Hogg announced that he was going to essentially fight against that, and he was going to use $20 million from some other organization to actively campaign against Democrats in primaries who are in safe seats. Now, his thinking is that these Democrats that are in safe seats, though when pressed, who are you talking about? He wouldn't name anyone. But that they are part of the problem because they're not radical enough. They are not far enough to the left. They don't push open borders enough. They don't push against the Second Amendment enough. They don't push for sex change operations for kids enough. And so those that are in the safest blue districts are going to be primaried out for more radical Democrats. Now, this is what his thinking is. You target the safe blue areas in a primary. That way, no matter how leftist they are, they're probably still going to win anyhow. Now, generally, the approach is you don't spend money in those areas. You spend money in, that is wasted money. What you do is you spend money trying to make sure that, if you have an incumbent that's in trouble, particularly in a general election, that you keep the seats that you may be in trouble of losing, and you try to get seats that are within striking distance. That's where you put your efforts. And David Hogg's approach is just different. And it conflicts Because even if the money that David Hogg is wanting to spend against the interest of the DNC, in which he's the vice chair, and replace what are more reasonable Democrats in primaries with more radical Democrats, but in safe areas, so you don't have to worry about a Republican winning because they're so lefty, the general election candidate. That is money that then cannot be spent to try and win or retain those closer races. And James Carville has come out really whipping on him. He's responded back. He made the comment, James Carville hasn't won an election since before I was born, referencing working on Bill Clinton's election. I think that a reasonable response to that is, well, at least I've won an election. I mean, David Hogg, best I can tell, has never run a campaign in his life. He's never, now he may have gone out and endorsed people, but James Carville, and I'm not saying that let's not forget James Carville was all but guaranteeing people that Kamala Harris was going to beat Donald Trump in the last election. So he's not always right, and he's a lunatic in certain capacities, but he is in somewhat touch with reality. And he has run campaigns. He ran Bill Clinton's, very instrumental in Bill Clinton's campaign. David Hogg is a guy who's never done anything other than be handed like little token positions. The only thing, best I can tell, that he's ever actually tried to do in terms of take what is nothing and like create something was when he decided, only for vengeance purposes, to start a pillow company to take down My Pillow as an industry. And it took him about 3 weeks before he bailed on that effort, because he found out that, it takes actual work, it takes knowledge, and it takes talent. Something that people on the left defy themselves because they surround themselves with people who tell them no matter what they say, no matter what they think, they're wonderful, they're brilliant. So they're never even allowed to go through the life experiences that make you grow and understand how to make things happen. And that's how you end up with a situation like this. But I think it's going to be interesting to see if these reports are true, that essentially they're telling him, you need to shut your mouth or get out. And someone like him, I just don't know that he can keep his mouth shut and what that's going to look like. So just a little bit of fun and intrigue within the DNC, and perhaps that call is expected.
Didn't take very long.
No, it did not take very long.
I think he's only been in that position for like 60 days.
Yeah, it hasn't been long at all. It was after. I mean, it was after the election, well after the election.
Yeah, I think it was end of February.
Seems like it was around that time. And it was, I mean, we played some of the audio where half the time they were just talking about their pronouns and singing songs. Pretty crazy stuff. Springfield's Talk 104.1. Let's get the latest news update.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see mostly sunny skies throughout the morning and then a slight chance for rain in the afternoon with a high near 80. Tonight a chance of showers and then mostly cloudy skies with a low around 60. For your Friday, a 60% chance of showers through mid-afternoon with a high near 76. And looking ahead to Saturday, mostly cloudy with a high near 70.
We were talking in the previous segment about a report today that there is going to be a call amongst DNC folks that is going to tell David Hogg, who's vice chair of the DNC, either shut your mouth or get out. Now, he hasn't been in there that long, and this is all around his plan that he's acknowledged to spend $20 million outside money, some other organization, in order to try and unseat Democrats that aren't lefty enough in primaries. So fighting against him, he's an enemy within, essentially, in terms of what the point and purpose of the DNC is. So they're going to tell him either, shut your mouth, just do what you're told, or get out. And Sarah was making a good point that, on one hand, here you have the Democrats, and they're talking about, we got to do something new. We need new fresh blood. We need new ideas. And so, well, this is definitely new. And they're like, nah, don't think so. Get out. This is the real problem that the Democrat Party has that is different than the problem that the Republican Party has. There are people oftentimes say two different Republican parties. There's the establishment big government party that doesn't believe in real meaningful cuts, doesn't believe in real meaningful limited government. And honestly, I think those are the people who run the Republican Party. And then you have people that are Freedom Caucus members and others that aren't necessarily members of the caucus that really truly do believe, no, we need to get rid of Medicaid fraud. We need to cut the size of government. We have to make these difficult, hard decisions in order to save this country from bankruptcy. And those are two divisions within the Republican Party that come into great conflict. In fact, it's going on right now. It's part of the reason that we don't have already the tax cuts in place, because there's battling going on as to how much to cut and who gets the tax cuts and so forth, right? But those differences, practically speaking, are not in complete opposition to one another. You can compromise, and while some people may not like it, you can still do it and both sides get a little bit of what they want. When you have a Democrat Party, and on one side you have party members that say, we need to continue to push for sex change operations for kids, and the other part of the party say, no, we need to stop doing that altogether, there's not really a compromise on that. You're either doing it or you're not. Those are opposed positions. It's like, abortion. You're pro-life or you're pro-choice or pro-abortion. And, it's probably not a good example because some people, well, I am up until a certain point and so forth. So just throw that example aside. But it is a situation in which one side gets what they want, and that means that the other doesn't. The issue with illegal immigration and some wanting to continue to push for, celebrating and uplifting terrorists and then those that are like, no, we really, even Bernie Sanders a couple weeks ago said Trump was right on the border, that's something that we needed to do. Anti-Semitism. In the Democrat Party, you have particularly younger people that are very, very openly anti-Semitic. And you have some institutions like Harvard that are doubling down on it, that they want to be a safe haven for anti-Semites, and that's where they're standing. And right now, you have the Trump administration that's saying no. And so you can't – there are these certain conflicts that one side has to win and the other side has to lose and go away, or you're going to continue to have this civil war going on. And that's the problem that the Democrat Party is dealing with right now. And, they created this monster. They created this monster because they wanted young blood. And they began taking some of these extremely radical views. They've evolved over the years. Many of these views are not views that the Democrat Party wants to espouse. They are the ones who change, not the Republican Party, when it comes to sex change operations for kids and girls being forced to shower with boys and open borders. These are issues that really weren't that controversial. Kind of everyone agreed on them. In fact, they weren't even issues in many capacities, borders being an exception for some ways. But and so with the left becoming, so much more radical and extreme, and then the young people believing that it is a moral and a virtue to hold those positions. Well, now in the Democrat Party, these people that they the Democrat Party embraced and allowed them to, okay, yeah, that's fine. You can go ahead and believe that, because they needed their vote and they needed their activism. All of a sudden are dealing with the reality that these people are getting into positions of power. These people are getting elected to Congress as Democrats. These people are getting elected as chair and vice chair of the DNC. And it's like starting a little fire that you think you have under control, and you stop paying attention to it, and all of a sudden you realize that it has spread and that you cannot control it because it is becoming more powerful than you. That's what the Democrat Party is dealing with right now. And I don't know that you can put that fire out. It's just gotten way too out of control. I'm kind of enjoying watching it because they have done this to themselves. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Rosie O'Donnell demands RFK Jr. resign over comments about autistic children. I'm sorry, I thought you left the United States. Am I wrong about that? I thought she wanted nothing to do. How about this? Shut your mouth. You're not here anymore. Who? First off, like anyone cares what that nasty old thing thinks anyhow. But I love these people like, I'm going to totally renounce America. I'm getting away with it. I don't want anything to do with it. But they're so obsessed and deranged. They're like, I demand that he resign. Oh, you do? From Ireland? Okay, thanks, Rosie. It is amazing to watch the left that has been, as part of their personality, they'll have a particular pet cause until someone they hate also takes on that pet cause, and then all of a sudden everything's turned upside down. And we're watching this play out to some degree with autism and RFK Jr. And RFK Jr., this is a guy that has long talked about autism and his desire to figure out what causes it. Of course, he's made, you know, the left hate pharmaceutical companies until you question whether or not vaccines have something to do with causing autism, and then all of a sudden, how dare you criticize pharmaceutical companies? They would never lie. They're totally honest. They never make mistakes. Everything's wonderful. Everything's perfect, and that's the position that they take when it comes to the potential side effects of vaccines. We're also supposed to believe that everything under the sun can cause a side effect, from peanuts to aspirin to Pepto-Bismol, which is why there are warning labels on everything. But a vaccine is the one thing that can cause absolutely no side effects whatsoever, according to the left. And if you claim that it does, that means that you're anti-science. Now, make sense of that. Well, Kennedy recently made comments. We're going to get a traffic update, take just like a 90-second break, in which he's talking about trying to, because he wants to figure out what's the sourcing, what's the cause of autism, because, hey, wouldn't it be great if we could eliminate autism? Because for a lot of people, it completely disrupts their lives. Well, all of a sudden, apparently, it is cruel and awful to characterize autism as something that needs to be cured. So I guess the fundraisers can stop. All of the awareness campaigns can stop, because now that RFK Jr. says, hey, it would be great if we could fix this so no one had autism any longer, it is a wonderful thing to have, and this is why Rosie O'Donnell wants him to resign, because he said this stuff. I mean, you hear the cliche that if so-and-so cured cancer, they'd still complain. I really, at this point, believe that. You have RFK Jr. talking about trying to figure out a way to eliminate autism, and all of a sudden autism is a wonderful thing. Trump did. Trump somehow did what Biden promised he would do, but didn't. And let's find a cure for cancer. They would say that's an attack on people with how dare you? How dare you? Do you know how many brave people have battled? Someone that I love has cancer. How dare you attack cancer? That's the position that they would take. Here's traffic.
Springfield's Talk 1041, your first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Today we'll see mostly sunny skies throughout the morning and then a slight chance for rain in the afternoon with a high near 80. Tonight a chance of showers and then mostly cloudy with a low around 60. For your Friday, a 60% chance of showers throughout the mid-afternoon with a high near 76. And looking ahead to Saturday, mostly cloudy with a high near 70.
April 29th, 5 to 7 p.m., I will be at Pinnagar Honda, the big grand opening, their new facility. Get your first 3 months of fuel for when you get a new car free, covered, taken care of. It's open to the public, brand new showroom. They're going to have free food from food trucks. This is a step above just free food. It is food truck free food. And the deals that they currently have these, so you don't have to wait until the 29th for this, but 0.99% interest rate available on select certified pre-owned Honda, Accord and Pilot in the top 15 American-made models. 3 models, that being the Ridgeline, Passport, and Odyssey, are in the top 10. Those 3 are made in Alabama, US of A. So incredible interest rates right now, brand new vehicles, and that brand new showroom floor, the big opening coming up, Pinnagar Honda. That grand opening again, open to the public, 5 to 7, April 29th. I'll see you there. If you come. If you don't, then I suppose I won't. All right, so message on the Pyramid Roofing Company talk and text line. My son has autism. You're not going to cure it, but we could maybe find a prevention. I personally don't think it's the vaccines, but I haven't ruled out food additives. Rosie is another. Rosie is mad because she found out Ireland doesn't sell her favorite fat foods. And if RFK Jr. bans it here, she will have nowhere to get her fix when she comes back in 6 months. It's that text message we were talking off air about some of these people and their maniacal approach to vaccines. Now, I look at a vaccine. Like, I just look at everything. I try to be consistent. And this, anything that you put in your body for the purpose of changing how your body behaves is going to change how your body behaves. And sometimes with some people, it may cause one's body to behave in a way that isn't good. And sometimes long term, it may do that in everyone. It always kills me whenever people want to dismiss the idea that it could have a side effect on your body when that's the entire point of medicine, is to have a side effect, is to make your body do something that it normally would not do on its own. You can't buy any over-the-counter anything without there being a list of warnings of potential side effects. But the moment that you say, well, okay, well, let's treat vaccines with the exact same approach, you're crazy. You're insane. You're a conspiracy theorist. Like, why is it a vaccine is magically the one thing that we put into our bodies with the purpose of altering how our body behaves that just is incapable of altering it in an unforeseen way? That just defies logic. You'll see some of these people, for example, right now, measles, that's the big thing. I love to cast anyone who doesn't get a vaccine for, measles for your kids, which I think is probably a very small number of individuals. It is mostly prevalent in, maybe the very religious, like Amish, perhaps, maybe Mennonites potentially, and then also people who come into this country illegally where they don't have these standards. But for the most part, people go to public schools, they have these vaccines. If you're somebody that doesn't, say you go on social media, like, well, I'm not giving my child the measles vaccine. You'll be ripped left and right about how you're putting your child's life in danger. Oftentimes by someone who might look like Rosie O'Donnell, someone that clearly doesn't take care of themselves in a way that is considered healthy. Or, some chain smoking dope smoker that doesn't eat any vegetables whatsoever, just doesn't have a healthy lifestyle. Now, of course, everyone has the ability to do it, but you'll have somebody that has probably a 90% chance of dying early from heart disease or diabetes because of their everyday habits, that feels that they are somehow righteous for condemning someone who doesn't give their child a measles vaccine when that decision will lead to a much, much, much smaller odd that the child is actually going to suffer because of that. These are the inconsistencies that I'm talking about here. And watching some of these people that have unhealthy lifestyles lecture people who don't get vaccines, like, really? Okay. Back to, so RFK Jr., what he was talking about, let me find the exact quote here. I didn't highlight it. Well, maybe it's on this story. Rosie O'Donnell, Tuesday, recent comments about autistic children destroying families. And he said autism destroys families, and more importantly, it destroys our greatest resource, which is our children. And he was talking about severe cases. But because he's in the Trump administration and a traitor to Democrats, this is an opportunity to attack him. But as usual, the Democrats do not have a measured response. So what is occurring here is all of a sudden, anyone who thinks autism is something that probably most kids would be better without, or most adults, anyone would be better without, you are a horrible person. How dare you insult people with autism? Rosie O'Donnell, who decided to leave the U.S. anyhow, said, I think it's very disrespectful telling CNN, because CNN thinks it's important to get her opinion, of course, because she rips on RFK Jr. I think it's disgraceful. I think he's wholly unqualified to be the head of Health and Human Services. I think most of the cabinet picks that Donald Trump has made are part of his vision of a reality show government and not the most qualified people available, especially Robert Kennedy. And, of course, if anyone would have a level of expertise in this area, it would be Rosie O'Donnell. She said, and to think that his family is the one that created the Special Olympics and he would go on with such disgraceful, dehumanizing remarks is absolutely deplorable, and I feel he should resign or be released from his position. So now autism is good and virtuous. It is insulting to look at it and to say, and listen, I've got family. Severely. The level of autism in which the member of the family will never be able to live on their own. Or if they do, it'll be in a facility in which they have constant care. What would be considered the most extreme example. To say that that is not disruptive is dishonest. And to say that, that family wouldn't rather that, a child in that more severe instance be able to function in a way that allowed them to have the independence in life that other people are allowed to have. I mean, it's just, it is this obsession that some of these people have on the left, to where they have such extreme hatred for people that aren't just like them, that they will defy reality and they will make absurd claims. And they really genuinely will, even something like autism, go from promoting fundraisers to, try to find the source of autism and a cure for autism and how to prevent autism, to how dare you criticize people who think autism is somehow a disruptor within a family life. There's just something severely wrong with so many of these people. They are deranged. The View, of course, demonstrates that as a news outlet on ABC. Trump had... there's this pattern that occurs. Trump will get asked a question, and he'll be like, well, I don't know, that kind of sounds like it might be a good idea. And then all of a sudden the headline is Trump proposes. And it's consistently this way. Trump had been asked about the idea of whether he thought it was a good idea that people who women or birthing persons, as Democrats call them, have a baby, writing them a check for $5,000. And Trump, in his usual fashion, he's like, oh yeah, that could be a good idea. So then, of course, this is Trump proposing $5,000 baby bonus. Now, you would think that that this would be something that the left would like. You would think, given that they're constantly talking about children being a financial burden. In fact, it's one of their arguments for abortion, that it's just because they have no other choice. They can't afford a baby. Oh, you have another baby and you're on welfare? You should get more money. But no. Why? Well, because Donald Trump said, well, that might be a good idea. These people are insane. Now, if you have, we've got to get a quick traffic update here. Part of what is amusing is that this isn't anything. The government, as long as I've been alive, has been financially incentivizing people to have kids. Whether it's right or wrong, this is absolutely no new concept, but because it's Donald Trump, again, the approach has to be, this is the dumbest idea ever. Here we go. Once again, Donald Trump is a lunatic. Yesterday on The View, this show, I am convinced, is part of an effort to make women look stupid. The fact that every single day that a major network, ABC, is like, hey, let's put women out there on television and essentially promote them as an example of smart women. Because if this is an example, those idiotic hags on that show are an example of smart women, this show is an insult to women. Absolute insult to women. Because they're stupid. Watching them yesterday talk about Trump saying that $5,000 per baby for a mother, it sounds like a good idea. Listening to them discuss why it's a bad idea is so full of contradictions, of reality, of their own perspectives on things. I mean, it is just a bunch of cackling hens that are sitting around hysterically and irrationally ripping on something in a way that makes no sense whatsoever. So the View co-host unloaded on Trump. Here's a Fox News story on this. For saying that giving mothers a $5,000 bonus was a good idea during their show on Wednesday. They were ripping on him on Wednesday. He wasn't on the show. Claiming the notion was insulting and racially motivated. Well, of course, right? By the way, I don't like this. This is not a good plan. I just don't believe that the government should be either giving people or taking away from people money based off of how many kids they decide to have. I don't believe in. I understand the motivation behind it, and that is to increase the population, which oftentimes is done budgetary reasons, but particularly when it comes to things like Social Security and the solvency of these different programs, you need to have more people being born, and the opposite is happening. And so this is very problematic when you look at a spreadsheet. But that being said, I don't agree with it. But that being said, so Whoopi Goldberg starts saying $5,000, it sounds like a lot of money, but if you can't pay your rent, if you can't pay for your after-school programs for your kids, it's not that much money. Now, these are the people that praise Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for giving $700 in cash to people who lost their homes. All of a sudden, $5,000 isn't enough to mean anything whatsoever. Co-host Alyssa Farah Griffin pushed back and asked if something was better than nothing, before noting, I feel like if Joe Biden proposed this, we'd all be saying it was groundbreaking. Well, of course we would. We all know this at this point, because nothing that these hysterical hags have to say are based in reality. It's for hate for Donald Trump. We imagine a world in which if this was a Kamala Harris idea, that they would be ripping on her. Of course not. Now, that voice of reason goes sideways, saying, I don't like the idea that somebody's saying, I'm going to pay you to have more kids. All right, well, okay, let's take that position. Guess what? If you're on welfare, you don't get a bonus for having kids. Is that what the View's saying? One of the arguments, the pushback here against Trump saying, I think that's a good idea, is they should not be paying people to have kids. No more welfare payments based off of the number of children. That sounds like a pretty good policy to me. Most of you know that in terms of the working people, we have these little things called, where you claim dependents, your children. And guess what? We're allowed to keep more of our money because we have more kids. So whether one agrees with this or not, financially, most of us have never been alive at a time where the government isn't offering us or incentivizing us financially to have kids, whether that is taking away less of our paycheck or offering to give people who don't work more of other people's paycheck. This apparently escapes the View. This is part of the foundation of why these women are so ridiculous in having this conversation. This is already done. This is nothing new. All right, so she goes on to say, this is Goldberg, I don't like the idea of somebody saying, I'm going to pay you to have more kids. I know we're not allowed to bring up the other times people suggested that, but I will tell you this is not the first time in the country. But let me tell you this, $1 billion in funding for schools and food banks to buy food was cut. My point is, it seems to me everything this administration seems to be doing is telling people not to have children. Really? Like fighting to decrease the number of abortions? I mean, that's pretty much the straight up stark example one can get. The Republican Party is the party of pro-life. The Democrat Party is the party of, kill your own kids if you want. Yet it's the Republican Party that she claims is doing everything they can to prevent people from having kids. Co-host Sonny Hostin suggested during the conversation the Trump administration is only worried about decreased births for white mothers. Well, of course. She said, I want to reframe the issue a little bit because when I look at something like this, these proposals, I want to know why. I want to know who is making them. And so when I looked into that, they're saying that the U.S. birth rate is declining. However, in 2024, there was a 1% increase in U.S. births. That increase was with Hispanic mothers and Asian mothers. Aha, so they don't seem to be concerned about that increase. They seem to be more concerned about the decrease in other populations, she said. Fellow liberal co-host Joe Behar said, just say it, white children. Well, now, what is interesting about the little statistics she gave here is that blacks weren't included. So that tells me that the black population, birth population, is going down. So why does that not mean that Trump is wanting an increase in black people? Because that runs contrary to their insane narrative. This is a political party that supports and promotes Planned Parenthood that disproportionately looks to kill black babies by setting up shops that provide abortions in black neighborhoods, and was started by Margaret Sanger, who wanted to cleanse society of black people. To claim that Trump, offhandedly, by the way, when asked about this proposal, said, that seems like a good idea. Meant it because he wants more white babies born, but not other races. As usual, projection. And runs contrary to everything that's reality. Springfield's Talk 104.1, I'm Nick Reed. Sarah Myers.
Thank you. Spring allergy season, it impacts millions every year. And if you're a person who suffers from allergies, I want to recommend an indoor air quality check with Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air. Now, they have products that can help purify your air, reduce allergens, and just make it a little easier to breathe this spring. And not only can they do this for your home, but they can do it for businesses as well. And of course, while you're at it, now is also a good time to schedule that AC tune-up before we fully get into that warmer weather season. And of course, for all of your HVAC needs, Foreman Mechanical Heating and Air are the go-to guys. Now you can find all of the contact information for Foreman Mechanical under the Sarah's Endorsements tab at ksgf.com.
You know, Michelle Obama continues to do this podcast with her brother, and increasingly people, I don't know.
It has to be failing.
I would think so. I mean, the most amount of attention it gets is when, we talk, I'm not we, but conservatives talk about some of the things she's saying. But most recently, she's just complaining about how hard it is being a black woman and how unfair it is. You know what? I think I think we as a culture and society need to start calling people like her out for what they are. Spoiled, ungrateful, privileged, entitled pieces of crap.
Now, what are you talking about? She only has, 3 homes?
Oh, yeah, I know. She does nothing. She does podcasts. She goes on vacations. She lives in the lap of luxury, which, fine. But for someone who is privileged enough to live a lifestyle light years beyond what every single human being ever in existence has ever lived, to sit around and complain. Oh, it's just so hard as a black woman. Shut up. She is no different than the spoiled, 16-year-old billionaire's daughter who gets a brand new car but pitches a fit because she doesn't like the color. Total spoiled brat, Michelle Obama. News in 60 seconds. Springfield's Talk 1041. I am Nick Reed. You may, if you're paying attention there, a couple commercials back, some company where you can go and do your will online, estate planning online. Listen, what I can tell you is I didn't even hear the name of the company. Just caught my ear, and it caught my ear because of the partnership that we have with Lori Rook and her Ozarks Elder Law, focusing on just this or just that particular situation. And I'm just going to offer up something much better for you, and that is Ozarks Elder Law. Whether it is a situation in which you are a caretaker for someone in your family. Listen, here's what happens, and I think we know it. If you're at a certain age, you think, oh, well, I'm going to be alive another 40, 50 years. I don't need to worry about that. I don't know if you know this or not, but every day people die unexpectedly. It just happens. That is a fact of life. And if you're a caretaker, we talked last hour about autism and how many on the spectrum are not able to take care of themselves, and that isn't a decision that you have made and have in writing locked down by Ozarks Elder Law, then you're going to have government involved in that. Do you really trust that? You gone and have some bureaucrat making that decision for you? It is so important. Don't think I'll wait until I'm retiring or when I get to the age I think I'm about ready to die, which is just sort of a crazy thing, but we all do it because it's not a fun thing to think about. I recommend that you contact the good folks there. And I mean, this covers wills. It covers just any property you have. Anything at all that deals with your eventual passing. And by the way, the consultation's free, and then you get a price set ahead of time if you decide that you want to work with them. It's not an hourly thing. You're not going to get nickel and dime. You will know exactly what it's going to cost to utilize their services. OzarksElderLaw.com, also KSGF.com under Nick's endorsements. We do have Author of the Week coming up. It was my fault. I miscommunicated with what was supposed to be today's author, so that author is going to be next Thursday instead. We are going to replay what was one of the more popular author interviews I did some time ago with Frank Lessay, and it's involving environmentalism and, of course, just all of the fake information that is out there that is scientifically fake information. And most of what we hear about from politicians regarding the environment and the reasons that you need to be forced to behave this way because if you don't, this is going to happen. It's not based in science. It's not based in reality. And we'll chat with that Author of the Week coming up in a moment. Sponsored by ABC Books on North Glenstone. First, the latest news.
And the first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by St. Clair the Ozarks Home Improvements. Today we'll see mostly sunny skies throughout the morning and then a slight chance for rain in the afternoon with a high near 80. Tonight a chance of showers and then mostly cloudy with a low around 60. For your Friday, 60% chance of showers through mid-afternoon with a high near 76. And looking ahead to Saturday, mostly cloudy with a high near 70.
Now, I wonder that story that Landis had there about O'Reilly's and the announcement that in order to make things more efficient, eliminating 11% of their workforce, will these left-wingers start protesting and vandalizing O'Reilly stores?
I wonder.
I mean, it seems very Doge-like, going in and eliminating jobs in order to become more efficient, to cut out what is now waste because of advancements in technology and so forth. I wonder if the Democrats are going to start targeting O'Reilly in the same way. Oh, it'd be interesting to see. traffic update, then Author of the Week, sponsored by ABC Books on North Glenstone. I'm Nick Reed. And I'm Nick Reed. It's Thursday, which means it is time for Author of the Week, sponsored by ABC Books on North Glenstone. This is a pretty good timing. We talked earlier this week about Biden attempting to ban offshore drilling and to permanently do so, and the incoherence of these different environmental policies. We have Frank Lissay with us. He's author of Climate and Energy Lies, Expensive, Dangerous, and Destructive. And for people listening, you've served as a state senator in Wisconsin and with Governor Scott Walker and his administration. How is it that you became so interested and involved when it comes to the truth of these environmental issues?
Well, it started a couple decades ago when I was in the legislature because I always wanted to engage on the big issues and make things better for regular people. And climate change, then called global warming, was an emerging issue, and there was policies and things and renewable energy standards. And I wanted to understand it and understand how dangerous it was, and what we needed to do about it, and why it was driving renewable energy standards at that time, but it's driven a whole bunch of other stuff now. And I had wind towers in my neighborhood, in my Senate district, and there were a lot of them, and they were controversial because they do cause some health problems for people who live close to them. And they don't want to admit that, and there were a variety of different issues with that. So I attended through the Heartland Institute, which I led for a while. They had a 2-day seminar with some very well scholars in this area, and they explained all the facts to us, and I come to understand that the world's been warming since about 1850, and we had the medieval warm period when Vikings settled in Greenland, and they had barley. They grew barley and had milk cows there. Trees grew, and it's too cold for that to happen now in Greenland. And the climate realists point that out, and the fact deniers and the alarmist side, say, oh, that was just a local event. There are a lot of studies around the world that show that there was a worldwide warming during that period of time. And the world is better for people when it's warmer. When there's more CO2, plants grow better. So I learned these facts, and then I came back to the legislature and said, this is kind of bunk. We shouldn't be doing this. And groups that should be interested in these policies said, well, give us legislation to react to. And these climate alarmists have cleverly largely used regulations and executive actions, like we've seen with Biden, to keep constricting energy, and now they're after our food supply too. And there's no scientific reason whatsoever to regulate methane. Methane is a tiny, tiny, tiny trace gas, even smaller than CO2. So that got me interested. And then when I led Heartland Institute, a big part of what they do is energy and climate. And then moved on to run my own organization. We have a great website making these complicated topics more understandable with good sources for regular people at truthinenergyandclimate.com, truthinenergyandclimate.com. We have a weekly e-newsletter that you can sign up for energy and climate news from the realistic perspective. And that's what led me to this.
We're talking with our author of the week, Frank Lessay. The book is Climate and Energy Lies, Expensive, Dangerous, and Destructive. I hesitate to use the term gaslighting because it has become such an overused term, but it is so prevalent increasingly. And when it comes to the environment, this is one of those areas where it seems to happen all the time. And I'm sure you, as you became informed on these issues, you go back to the legislature, you get looked at as if you are somehow a climate denialist. We're told that we need electric vehicles so that we get off of being reliant off foreign countries when it does the opposite, or that electric vehicles, the batteries, this is good for the environment. Like, no, it's not reality. But the climate change itself, and I know I oftentimes get called, well, you don't even believe in climate change. And my response is, I think that I do, and I understand it better than you do because it, like you said, it's always changed. It's part of these cycles. Every planet that we can observe with climates have these changes. Yet in their minds, for whatever reason, and maybe you can explain if you have any insight on this, that they think that it should just be static. That climate is something that should be at this magical point that never veers off course. And to me, that seems like the denial of science.
Well, that certainly is, because the climate's always changing. It always will. So, climate change is real. It is changing. Is man-made climate change real? No. Man-made climate, and we do affect the environment. And one of the biggest ways we affect it is the urban heat island effect. And people can understand this. You drive into a big city, it gets hotter. Well, you got all those buildings, all that concrete, all the HVAC systems, the air conditioning, heating. It's hotter by 7 to 10 degrees. And that's how NOAA and NASA, they literally cook the books. They are lying to us about the Earth's temperature because they have temperature records going back to a time when temperature stations were in a rural area and now are in an urban or suburban area, and the temperature naturally has increased. But they don't lower the temperatures to make it static, so to speak. They take those temperatures as fact and they add them into the mix. They're doing this across the Western world. They're closing temperature stations and making up the data. Don't just close them and take them out of the mix. No, they make up the data. They estimate the data for 1/3 of the temperature stations in America and in the United Kingdom and in Australia. And then they also, on top of that, go back and they have cooled the past and warming the present. They adjust the data. And there's some reasonable reason to adjust a little bit, but why is all the bias to cool the past and warm the present when you have the heat island effect that I just said? So we're being sold a line of goods. Why? It's about the money and power. NOAA and NASA get more money and are more important because of the climate change scam, and they help leftist politicians largely spend more of our money, adding to our $36 trillion debt. And China gets money, and China gives money, and there's evidence of this. It's hard to trace, but they give money to nonprofits here to fight American energy policies. So China benefits the most because we buy 80% of the wind and solar and batteries and the components and the metals and everything needed for them come from China. And they make our electric rates higher. And people are starting to understand this. They've been lying to us. Wind and solar, it's cheaper, it's cheaper, it's cheaper. They still tell us this. Then why does my electric rate keep going up and up and up, my bill go up and up as you add more wind and solar? Because they're lying to us.
We're talking with our author, Frank Lessay. The book is Climate and Energy Lies, Expensive, Dangerous, and Destructive. Their tactics obviously are very effective, particularly in the schools. When I was a kid, I still remember one of the tactics they used was telling us about acid rain. And I remember vividly as I was a kid and we would be driving and it would rain and you could hear the rain on the top of the vehicle, wondering if once the acid rain made its way here, would it melt through the metal of the vehicle? And they instill this imagery we've seen over time: polar bears swimming, glaciers breaking apart. But one of the areas that they successfully, I believe, have managed to hoodwink people is CO2 warmer weather. That CO2, that the more of that is just bad. But CO2 is bad. It's going to cause us all to bake, and this is bad for the environment. Would you talk about that?
Yeah, that's simply not true. And one thing that people don't know, and I cover this in the book, and the book is a little thick. It's 300 pages, but it has a lot of pictures, a lot of graphs, a lot of sources, and it explains things on a lot of different topics. And this is a big field: energy and climate. And water vapor is the dominant, most abundant, important greenhouse gas. NASA says it's 70% of the greenhouse effect. Dr. Will Happer of Princeton, a physicist who's brilliant, and you should see his work, folks. Happer, Happer, and says it's wind or water vapor and clouds together make up 95% of the greenhouse effect. And CO2 has already reached what is saturation, meaning that most of the warmth that CO2 causes has already been done, and incremental gains and more CO2 adds very little warming. And it's super plant food. I mean, plants grow best, most plants grow best at 3 to 5 times the amount of CO2 we have now, and it'll take 200 years for CO2 to double. 200 years to double, and most plants grow 3 to 5 times better. Greenhouses add CO2 because it makes the plants grow bigger, faster, with less water, tolerate heat better, tolerate drought better. It's all good news, folks. And longer growing seasons, because it's a bit warmer, are good. Worldwide, contrary to more propaganda and lies that we're told, worldwide crop harvests in virtually every crop in every country in the world keep improving. They were setting records for both yields and harvests. Yields are the amount of crops that come from the same acre of land, the same amount of land. And they're increasing all the time. And NASA says the world is greener, 35% greener in 40 years. And they attribute that 70% of that to more CO2. Forests the size of Texas have regrown around the world naturally because they grow so much better with CO2 and tolerate heat and drought better. It's amazing plant food. It's miracle grow. And we're trying to stop it. It's crazy. We need more food for more people, more animals, and healthier forests.
I was having a conversation last year sometime with somebody that was with a very sizable company and talking about all of these different designations that you can, quote, earn that give you some sort of label that you're green, you're doing well for the planet. And what's sad is that he noted that it's all marketing, but it's the game you have to play. That there are certain companies, businesses out there that won't do business with you unless you have this designation. And so it's all just about cutting checks and money. And it's something that clearly some of these industries recognize it's all just a scam. Do you think we'll get to the point where enough people recognize that this is so often just a money-making scheme and they will begin to not find it so necessary to spend money and effort just to get a label that's meaningless, or even worse, counterproductive?
Yeah, well, I think we're at the front edge of this. We're just starting now to turn the corner. It's a great big multi-trillion-dollar graft ship, so it's not going to turn immediately. It's not going to be very easy, but it's happening. It's happening in Europe. It's happening in Canada. The Alberta ruling party in Alberta, their government, came out with a statement and adopted as a party that CO2 is major plant food and good for the environment. It is not a pollutant. There's a bill introduced in Wyoming just a couple days ago to make CO2 great again, recognizing it as great plant food. So we're starting to see this bubble up from the grassroots again because we're really fighting the globalists. This is about the UN, the World Economic Forum, WEF, and originally started 50 years ago. So they've been at it for a very long time with the Club of Rome. There's a book there that they said we're going to use global warming to scare people so we can get what we want, because they want to get ultimate control. The UN wants more power and boss around nations like the EU does in Europe, where they say, oh, you've got to do these things for the climate. So now you've got crazy things like Denmark is going to turn 10% of their farmland into forests. So they're taking 10% out of productivity. For the climate, they're also introducing taxes on cows and pigs that are going to come into next year and the following year and get more expensive for the climate. So food costs are going to get more. In Ireland, because the EU dictates, they're killing 200,000 milk cows. They're taking them out of production. So the cost of milk and dairy and cheese and butter are going to go up in Ireland. So they're doing these crazy things. They're attacking our food supply and our energy supply. People are getting sick of the ever-increasing costs. And like our energy, they've lied to us about it. Here in Wisconsin, where I live, 2 articles I just read. My electric rates are going to go up in the future because they've approved $1 billion in solar panels, multi-square miles of solar panels, and $1 billion and $3 billion in transmission wires to move these electrons around, which we don't need any of this stuff. It's just cost added plus. So my electric bills are going to go up to pay for this stuff. And people are getting tired of that. And it hurts the poor the most. And when poor people have to spend more for their energy and their food priorities, they have less money to spend on everything else. And that hurts everyone else. It hurts the economy. People are getting tired of it. They're seeing this in Germany, where they're deindustrializing. Major companies like Volkswagen are closing plants and laying off thousands of people, literally. And people are sick of it. They're getting tired of it, but they don't quite understand it yet, but it's dawning on them.
Well, and it always helps to have some hard scientific facts and a scientific approach. And appreciate you being with us here this morning. Our author of the week, Frank Lissay. Again, the book you can get at ABC Books on North Glenstone. Climate and Energy Lies, Expensive, Dangerous, and Destructive. Springfield's Talk 104.1. I'm Nick Reed. Hey, tomorrow morning is a hero's breakfast. We're going to be broadcasting live at Scramblers. If you're a veteran, you come by, you're going to get free breakfast as we broadcast live, 6 to 9. That's in the AM. And it is thanks to Scramblers, their generosity, the Warrior's Journey, their generosity, Delta Roofing, their generosity, and Air Services, heating, cooling, plumbing, electrical, their generosity. And all you got to do is come out if you're a veteran. Of course, Scramblers is open for everyone at 6 a.m., as it is every day. But if you're a veteran, that is a special day for you tomorrow to get that free breakfast. Also, I would definitely recommend that if you've been wavering, or maybe you haven't ever thought of actually going on a Great Escape with us. You always hear about it, and you think that'd be nice. I would do it. Now, obviously, I want you to do it because these are fun. And I always I'm not worried about it being a quote success or anything. We've never had, trouble making these trips happen. If anything, the only problem that we've ever really had is that too many people sign up, and we'll, able to add some seats on the plane, and people have to go on a wait list as reserve or alternates in case somebody drops out. And that has worked in the past. But it's just fun. And for me, there's the selfish component of getting to spend time, like meaningful time with those of you who go along, some of which literally have become my lifelong best friends. That's just what you find. Now, you may think, I don't need any new friends. I like my pattern of life the way it is. You can still have such an incredible time with whomever it is that you bring. Just people look back 30 years ago or 20 years ago, and it's this sort of thing that they remember. They don't remember the new TV they bought or the new car they bought or other things that do cost money, sometimes necessary, sometimes not. But you think, oh, that'd be cool. That brand new computer, it's such an upgrade. Nobody's like, remember when we bought that new computer? No. But it's the memories. And it's the good times, sitting by the beach, getting the room service, seeing shows if you want to, just walking along the beach at sunset or sunrise. Of course, we do the show while we're there. If you want to be part of that, you don't have to. It's up to you. And just being able to walk around and eat whenever you want, drink whenever you want, and not even having to leave your room and eat when you want and drink when you want. That's my favorite. Love the room service. Love that all that's covered, all inclusive, under $2,000 a person. For the garden side rooms. The ocean view rooms are a couple of $100 more. I will say that Cam has twice, since I talked to her, had to call the resort and sort of renegotiate to swap out some of the garden view rooms for the ocean view rooms because all of what we had reserved got booked up twice now. And I'm not sure where we are with that now, but if you want a choice in that, I definitely would talk with her today, get in contact with her today, and then you can get your slot reserved if you want. You don't have to pay the whole thing right now. I think final payment is July 1st. I know it's July sometime, but Cam can give you all that information. You can just reach out to her. She's at The Travel Group. And we have all of the information about the trip itself, where it is, what it includes, which is everything, including airfare directly there, the taxes, the tipping, the drinks, the food, everything, which is a pretty incredible deal when you look at being gone for a week and just having such an incredible time, or 6 days. And make the call today, or you may miss out. And then you'll be very sad. KSGF.com, KSGF Great Escape. You'll find it on the rotating tile. Contact info's there. Traffic update, I'm Nick Reed.
Springfield's Talk 1041, your first alert forecast from Ozarks First meteorologist Tom Schmidt, sponsored by Wolfpack Cleaners, your residential and commercial cleaning professionals. Today we'll see mostly sunny skies throughout the morning and then a slight chance for rain in the afternoon with a high near 80. Tonight that rain will continue on and then mostly cloudy skies with a low around 60. For your Friday, a 60% chance of showers through mid-afternoon with a high near 76. And looking ahead to Saturday, mostly cloudy with a high near 70.
One of the moves by the Trump administration that has gotten so many in the mainstream media upset is the fact that in response to changing times and changing media, changing the makeup of those that are in the White House press corps and who gets asked questions and so forth. Now, the media, the traditional media hates Donald Trump. They are overwhelmingly left-wing Democrats. I mean, nobody denies this. Now, they try and claim that they're perfectly fair, but they no longer deny that they are biased and that they are left-wing. They're also a form of gathering and delivering news that is part of a vastly different landscape than it was even 10 years ago. Increasingly, people get their information from numerous different sources outside of the traditional media sources. Much of that is in podcast form. Even Democrats acknowledge this through their post-election behavior and reflection on, how do we get a Joe Rogan? How do we do that? They're trying to trying and to figure out how they can operate within this new world. And that's a recognition of the fact that so many Americans get their information from these sources. And as human beings, change is sometimes, it has to be deliberate because we get accustomed to, oh, well, this is this because it's the way it's always been. And when it comes to news, older generations in particular, news is only news if it's delivered on television or on radio or in a newspaper in that format that everyone is familiar with. That's what makes it news. And you're a journalist if you have one of those jobs. But what is the point of news? It is to provide people with information about what's going on. And as increasingly Americans go to other places like podcasts, that means that landscape has changed. And people in traditional media, particularly if you go to journalism school, I would imagine, having not gone myself, but you go to you want to be a journalist, want to be a reporter, you go to school and they teach you whatever they teach you, and then you go and you get a job. Maybe you get an internship, and then you end up, starting, if it's television news, as a copywriter, if they're still even called that, probably content provider or something. And then, maybe you get a field reporting position, and then you get on the weekends, and then maybe you get and you are a journalist not because you are providing information to an audience, but because you do it a certain way. And that is what is that to traditional media is what defines a journalist. No, you have to be on a nightly news broadcast, or you have to do a formatted morning show that always starts with weather for just a little teaser and then goes to 3 top stories, and then you go to a commercial break, and it's all very it's all this formula and this structure, and that's how you know that you're a reporter. It's not your content. Now that's the mindset of that. To me, a journalist is someone that has an audience eventually at some point, builds one, because they're providing information about what's going on that audience wants. And so while somebody like, Joe Rogan may not be traditionally a journalist in the way of went to journalism school and got a job in the traditional way, and I'm on a broadcast that airs Monday through Friday and so forth. But if he has more Americans that tune into him to hear what the president or people who are running for president have to say for 3 hours, to me, that is providing a greater journalistic service than what many in traditional media is doing, because of the results, not the format, not the degree, but the results. And it's the difference between results-oriented recognition of what something is versus what it looks like, what's supposed to look like this. And so when the White House and under the Trump administration realize and recognizes the significance of these podcasters, to me, it makes perfect sense that you start recognizing them as significant media outlets. Now, the mainstream media, the way that they are going to, of course, see it as well, it's because they're right-wing. It's because they are Trump supporters. Well, you can say what you want to, but the fact of the matter is, when just as many people are tuning in to get information from them as they are through traditional media means, why would you not then begin to treat them as information sources based off their results? There was an exchange between what I guess was a story that was being done by CNN, trying to explore why do these people think that they're journalists. And one of the reporters by the name of Jordan Conradson, Donnie O'Sullivan, spoke to a number of these non-traditional people that are now weirdly being treated like they're actual journalists. And he spoke with, among others, Natalie Winters, who is one of the persons that delivers information to an audience on War Room, which is Steve Bannon's deal. And the exchange, it's going somewhat viral because people see it as, well, she really schooled him, but I think there's more important messaging here. And he asked her essentially, well, what do you say to people who ask, are you really even a journalist?
The people, and I'm sure you see this online every single day, who say you don't deserve to be here because you're not a real journalist. What's your response to them?
Well, I'm pretty sure the group of people in there spent, 4 years covering for someone who was essentially dead, and that's being charitable in my description of him, a president by the name of Joe Biden. So to all those people who are apoplectic over having new media voices, you guys failed, and that's why we're here.
Now, of course, this resonates with people who are tired of traditional media because what she said is factually accurate. And the perspective of somebody that might be traditional media will be like, oh, okay, all right, I guess you have a point. But they're not realizing the ultimate point here. And it's about what is the point of journal? You're asking, what do I say to people who say I'm not really a journalist? Well, what is the point of journalism? We have spent years being lied to by the media. And if you don't want to accept that premise, then you're lost in all of this. You are either not paying attention or you don't want to recognize the truth. This is a media that allowed itself to censor. I mean, just a couple of examples that you're well aware of, that allowed itself to censor the Hunter laptop story because the Biden administration or the people within the government that wanted Joe Biden to win told them not to air it. And then the media itself not only censored it, but condemned people who wanted to report on it. The covering up for Joe Biden, this portrayal that he was just fine when many of them now are making money off the fact that they were lying to their audience. What is the point of journalism? And one of the missing elements in this criticism that we get from the mainstream media of podcasters, for example, or even outlets that are attempting to fit the more traditional media format like Newsmax or one of those outlets where they do have actual television networks, and they're trying to make a mark in that way of delivery. The CNNs and the NBCs and the CBSs and the ABCs of the world, and Fox News falls into this fold too, because they've been critical of much of this with the White House recognizing these alternate media outlets. What they don't do to make their point is give examples of where it is that the non-traditional media has erroneously reported news. What they don't say is, well, listen, I mean, you say you're a journalist, but here's a list of stories in which you were factually wrong. Do you notice they don't ever do that? They just sort of demean them because, well, you're just a podcaster. I think that the question should be turned around, and some schmuck from CNN who's like, well, what do you say to people who say you aren't a journalist? I say, well, what do you say when people say you're not a journalist? What makes you a journalist? Being on TV? Being part of just some sort of format? What we have here is this division that has been created, and it's why I believe, and it's happened organically out of a desire by people to know the truth about what's going on. The traditional form of media, I believe, is eventually, it's killing itself. And what is filling that vacuum are these podcasts that are populated largely by people who really genuinely want to have fact-based discussions and want to report exactly what is going on, and then you take that information for what you want, and then you kind of make the decision for yourself. And this is why what has naturally happened, I think, in people's minds, for the media to become less liberal or to become more fair and less biased in its product, that means, and this is just how we are as people, because what we think of as news, nightly news and the morning news, that those networks would have to be taken over by people that recognize, oh, we've gone too far to the left and we need a format. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think increasingly people, and this is what's happening, they just are saying, I don't trust you. These people over here I trust. Because I don't find them going on and on about Russian collusion that never happened, or covering up a Hunter Biden laptop story that did happen, or just almost every day. Today, Marco Rubio calling out Politico, I think, who had a story that Trump was thinking about. I forgot exactly what it was, something to do with sanctions maybe, and Rubio's like, that is absolutely not true. Absolutely not true. Almost every day. And the media has so little concern about actually delivering a product that's trustworthy, they don't even apologize anymore whenever they report something that's wrong. Now, I follow all of these different news outlets. And I know people on the left, they want their echo chamber. And so this conversation is lost on them. But I can tell you the reasons that I visit a Daily Caller or a Daily Wire or some of these other outlets is because very rarely do they report on something that turns out to be factually inaccurate. While the mainstream networks do it so often, they don't even stop to apologize for it any longer. To them, that's just that's what we were told. And so if you are looking for sources that provide you actual true information, now you're never going to find anyone who's perfect, but what you do is you seek out someone that you learn over time actually tries and that if they mess up, they'll be the first one to tell you why it happened, how it happened, apologize for it, because they want you to know that if ever they mess up, you will learn it from them, because that creates credibility. And, you know, that is something that these podcasts, so many of them, and these, you know, non-traditional news outlets have going for them. It is that credibility that they're creating. And part of the reason is because, unlike the mainstream media, their goal isn't to make Donald Trump look bad. Their goal isn't to help make sure that we, quote, save democracy from Donald Trump. It's just to be like, hey, what's going on? That's the way news used to be. And I guess that's the way news still is in this country. It's just not on the major networks. Springfield's Talk 1041, I'm Nick Reed. And a couple of news stories that might as well be titled Gavin Newsom running for president. So you had this outrage, rightfully so, that was part of his story in which there was an illegal immigrant convicted of manslaughter, driving drunk, high, speeding nearly 100 miles per hour, and crashed into a car driven by a young couple. 19-year-old killed them both. And sentenced to only 10 years, and at that, with 6 years still left to serve, California's like, 3 years is quite enough, and being let out. And so Trump has, of course, announced, all right, we're stepping in on the Fed level here. Gavin Newsom's office have revealed that they are going to comply with ICE after the illegal immigrants' early release plans have been exposed, and that they will be more than happy to turn him over instead of doing what California normally does, and that is act as a sanctuary state and refuse to turn them over to ICE. Then, another story, Gavin Newsom begs regulators to keep refineries in business after California Dems ran industry out of town, and he's asking state regulators to do everything they can, because the oil refineries are being shut down through Democrat policies in California so that they can't survive. They don't make them illegal, they just make it impossible for them to continue to operate. And so you've got a number of these, Valero's recent announcement being one of them. They're taking at least one of their refineries offline in 2026. Well, Newsom is asking regulators to figure out a way to keep them online. Why? Because he's running for president, which is an acknowledgement from Gavin Newsom himself that the Democrat policies are not good for Americans.